here's your outfit of the day. I decided to get a little zhuzhed up to go to the orthodontist and the grocery store. So I put on a dress. This is a Saks Fifth Avenue linen dress that I got 1 or 2 years ago at Valley Apparel, which is a secondhand store I've mentioned before in South Williamsport, Pennsylvania. I'll put their website in the description box. I've paired it with my just gold jewelry because I feel like gold goes with this shade of green. I absolutely love this dress because it's comfortable, but yet I think it looks nice. The only thing that would make it better, if you can hear me, Saks Fifth Avenue, pockets. Pockets in a dress like this would be chef's kiss. I have my off the beaten track shoes, which at this height, you wouldn't want to go off the beaten track unless you want to risk breaking your neck. Make sure you always have someone with you to say, "Can you hold my hand?" if you have to go walking down a gravel driveway or across a field, if you have on these shoes. Well, there you go. My outfit of the day. Well, hello and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I want to talk about the homeschool curriculum that I've used for the past 20 something years. And that curriculum would be called Sonlight. Now, before I get into it, I often get the question when people find out that I homeschool, they'll say, do you homeschool traditionally? Do you use a curriculum? Do you use a cyber school? Do you do CCA, which stands for Commonwealth Charter Academy? And it's so funny because I was just at the grocery store a little while ago before filming this, and a lady at the deli counter thought I looked familiar to her, and we struck up a conversation, and she, of course, school came about. And I got that same exact question, which made me laugh thinking about, filming this later on. So I am a traditional homeschooler. I have never done what is called cyber school. None of my children have ever gone to school. They've never done public, private, or anything in between. It's always been just solid homeschooling. And for most of those years with a curriculum called Sonlight. This is actually my very first catalog that I ever got from them, which is dated 2002, April 1st, 2002 to March 31st, 2003. And I've saved it for posterity's sake. So I have some other catalogs. I've always wanted my kids to be on the cover, but I've never taken the time to have a nice photo taken and submitted. That's always a contest every school year. You can submit a photo and maybe you'll win. The premise for Sonlight, it was started by a homeschooling family, actually, a husband and wife who homeschooled their 4 children and came up with a good, what would you say, formula. It was a really organic start to the company years ago. And in fact, I believe if not all 4 children, most of the children are involved in the company now as adults who themselves are homeschooling their own children. I know at least 2, if not all 4. Anyway, it's considered a literature-based homeschooling curriculum. I went with it. I actually felt like when I was looking through this catalog all those years ago, I literally felt like the sky had opened and a beam of light shone down upon this catalog. Can you relate? Anything in your life excite you like that, where you found something, you found that perfect thing that you were looking for, and you had that feeling that the bright light was shining down on it, and you said, this is it, this is for me. That's how I felt about Sonlight. And over the years, that feeling has not diminished. I still love the curriculum. today just as much as I did back in 2002 and 2003. So my oldest son, I wasn't able to start with the kindergarten curriculum for him. So I kind of did a piecemeal thing for kindergarten. And then we jumped in with first grade. Back then, the cores, by core I mean your Bible, your readers, your history and geography, all of that is considered the core, and then you can add on math and English and science and whatnot based on where the child is, because that's, if there's nothing else great about homeschooling, it's that children can go at their own pace and they don't have to be called ahead or behind. They can just be wherever they are. So back then the cores were numbered. So it was core 1, core 2, core 3. But they were always clear to say that the numbers didn't necessarily correlate to a grade, because again, it could be wherever the child is on their learning journey. I forget what year it was, but they changed it to letters. So now it's core A, core B, core C, D, E, F, G, H. And again, they're sure to say that it's fluid, you know. So if you have a child who is in first grade, maybe they'll start with core A, but maybe they'll start with core B. Or if you have a child that's in first grade and you have a child that's in fourth grade, maybe you want to combine them together and you would go with core C. Whatever floats your boat, really, because as the home educator, you are the one in control, you know. So that's another great thing. So I did, in, you know, first graders, have them do A and then B and C and so on and so forth. However, I don't make it a strong, fast rule that they have to finish a core in a school year, because again, it's on a timeline. So whenever a child ends the core, that could be at the end of the school year, but it could be in October, November, December of the next year. And that's fine. And when they end that core, they'll just start with the next one that comes after it. You know what I mean? So that's how I've done it. And, you know, again, I love that aspect of homeschooling, that I have the ability to choose. The only thing I need to do is, you know, for me, I live in Pennsylvania. So for Pennsylvania, there is a Pennsylvania homeschool law, which would say you need 180 school days or so many hours, depending on whether you're in primary education or secondary education. I couldn't tell you what those hours are because I've never done the hours. I've always done 180 days. And we have what I call a heavy day of school, where you might have every single subject that day and then maybe even some electives, and then a light day of school. If it's, let's say, a day that has a lot of errands or lessons out of the house, like dance or music or things like that, then a light day of school might just consist of a reader, a little bit of history and English, or math, English, and science. You get the picture. Again, it's fluid. And I do keep I can't say that word. Extemporaneous log of everything that's going on. So then what I've done with my 3 older children and now my fourth child, when they hit high school, Sonlight has what are called I call them the hundreds. So core 100, core 200, core 300, 400, etc. So I just, with the first, second, and third child, they just did core 100 in 9th grade, core 200 in 10th grade, core 300 in 11th grade, and then in 12th grade, they were able to choose. So my oldest son decided in 12th grade that he would do the British literature core, and that actually set him up to take the AP test. And then he did a psychology course through Sonlight that also set him up for the AP test. My second son was a bit more of a crazy quilt, and that was completely fine for him. And my third child, who is my oldest daughter, she chose to do American literature. And sorry, Sonlight, if you're listening, I borrowed that from a friend who already had the American literature core because she's doing it in 12th grade. I don't know if my next 12th grader coming down the line is going to want to do that, so I didn't want to shell out the money for it. But Sonlight, I have given you a lot of support over the years, and my bookshelves are a testament to that. I wanted to share with you a couple of my favorite read alouds, and then there's actually 2 books in this stack, here they are, that are not technically read alouds. Now, what do I mean by a read aloud? In the lower grade or lower core levels, there's always, you know, a line on the schedule or a column on the schedule that says read aloud. As mentioned, it's a literature-based curriculum, and many studies have shown, I encourage you to look it up for yourself, that reading to your child aloud is a great benefit to their mind, to their learning, their ability to problem solve, and then a great bonding experience for you and the child. So that was really one aspect that I loved about Sonlight, because as a young mother, one of my favorite things to do with my babies and toddlers and preschoolers was to go to the library and get as many books as possible and have reading time every day, in the morning, anytime if they wanted to read, but definitely before nap time and definitely before bedtime. I can still have, you know, lovely memories of just the feeling on the side of my shoulders of little heads leaning up against me as I read picture book after picture book after picture book. So with Sonlight and their read alouds, you know, that sold me on it. Now, when the kids get to high school, they obviously, there's no read aloud schedule time. If they wanted me to read something aloud, I certainly would. I had one of my high schoolers who asked me to read a certain section. So in the curriculum in high school, there was a section called something like historical history and biographies. That section of books, that high schooler asked me to read. And I absolutely treasure those memories of that time spent with him. I'll say it was one of my sons. And I actually learned a lot. There were quite a few books in that curriculum about subjects that I had little knowledge, if any. And so I really felt like my grasp of history and then some biographies of people really grew. I'll tell you, there was one book I didn't really care for. If I can think of the title, it was so long. One Day in the Life of Ivan Ivanovich, I think it's called. It's literally one day, as mentioned in the title, in the life of a man named Ivan who is in a Siberian work camp in the early 1900s. And while I enjoyed it from the point of view that I learned a great deal, I mean, obviously I was just have this ethereal picture of a Siberian work camp. That really gave me a clear picture of what it was like, but it also made my mind think in black and white. It was very gray, depressing and sad, and I feel things deeply. So I would feel like I'm kind of in the Siberian work camp. Which, I mean, that's what books do, don't they? They transport you to another world while you're reading. So, which is why you need to be careful about what you put in your mind. You know, you want to put good things in. Obviously, we have to read things about the atrocities of the world so that we can be informed and hopefully not allow those things to happen again. Anyway, I'm getting up on a soapbox. Let me get back to the point of Sonlight. So these definitely, I can't say, you know, what's my absolute favorite read aloud? And these aren't even all of what I would consider in my favorites category, but we would be here all day if I showed them all to you. I rounded up a few of them to share with you. So you can see that they all have colored stickers on them. So each core has a color. And I'm not necessarily going to necessarily remember what each one is. And it doesn't matter necessarily, because from the time that I purchased a Sonlight core to today, things might have shifted. You know, they're always changing things around. They might think one book goes better here. Or they might think a book, you know, we've used that a while and now a new book can come in. So things have shifted and changed. So for your purpose, it doesn't necessarily matter. But even if you are an adult watching this movie and you do this movie, yeah, I'm suddenly a movie star. Pardon me, I'm having a bit of allergy issue. If you are an adult watching this YouTube video, you have never homeschooled, you have no desire to homeschool, but you are a reader. And I'm guessing that by the fact that you're still with me, that you are a reader. You might like to pick up some of these books, because even though they're technically, you know, suggested for kids, some of them not, you could benefit from every single one of them. So this book, Little Britches by Ralph Moody, is about Ralph Moody's life. So it's autobiographical, but I do feel like he might have, you know what you do. You blur the lines between truth and reality. Truth and reality. Oh my goodness gracious. Between reality and imagination to make a book, you know, gripping. But I absolutely love this book. You know what I might do, if you don't mind? You could always skip this if you're not interested at all. I'm going to read you the backs of all of them. Of course, the back of this one doesn't necessarily have a full description. It's more of like an advertisement. So it says, one of the most beloved books of our times, Little Britches, filled with drama and adventure of authentic ranch life, peopled by unforgettable characters like the frightening sheriff of Fort Logan and Mr. Thompson, who fought with Kit Carson, and Two Dog, Thompson's wild Indian blood brother. Brave, poignant, touching, funny, stimulating, inspiring. It is all of these things. Don't miss reading this book. Oh, so that's actually what the Boston Herald had to say about this book when it was published in 1950. I love this book. I think you will too. Okay, the next one, Across 5 Aprils. This book, if you are a student of the Civil War, if you have any interest in the Civil War and you have not read this book, I encourage you to do so. So this is in the core where the Civil War is introduced for the first time in any depth. So there is, you know, there's some heart-wrenching things in this book. I mean, I don't think I've ever read this, and I've read it now 5 times out loud to 5 different children, and I cry every time. Tears of, you know, emotion that cannot be held back for this book. So this was written by Irene Hunt, and it was a Newbery Medal honor book. Let me see when it was published. 1964 originally. So it's the unforgettable story of young Jethro Creighton, who comes of age during the turbulent years of the Civil War. The Chicago Tribune had this to say: "This is a beautifully written book filled with bloodshed, hate, and tears, but also with love, loyalty, and compassion, with unforgettable characters, and with ideas and implications that have meaning for young people today." This is a winner if you haven't read it. Now this book is called Follow My Leader. It's found, when I read it to my kids, it's found in core A, I think, called Follow My Leader by James B. Garfield. Let me see when it was published. Published in 1957. It's a puffin book if you're into puffin books. After Jimmy is blinded in an accident with a firecracker, he has to relearn all the things he used to know: how to get dressed, how to find his way around the house, even how to eat. With the help of a determined therapist, he learns to read Braille and use a cane. Then he's given the chance to have a guide dog. Learning to work with Leader is not easy, but Jimmy tries harder than he ever has before. Can Leader really give him the ability and the confidence he needs? Leader is the name of his guide dog. And if you want the answer to that question, you'll have to read the book. All right, this book actually wasn't a read aloud. This was in one of the high school levels, and I just happened to pick this up during the winter because the cover looked interesting to me. Don't judge a book by its cover. I always judge a book by its cover. But I loved this book so much. Interestingly, I was talking about it to my two older sons, and they don't remember reading it. So we think that this was actually put into the core when my third child was in high school. So it's called When You Reach Me by Rebecca Stead, published in 2009. And this is what the back says. By sixth grade, Miranda and her best friend Sal know how to navigate their New York City neighborhood. They know where it's safe to go and who to avoid, like the crazy guy on the corner. But things start to unravel. Sal gets punched by a kid on the street for what seems like no reason, and he shuts Miranda out of his life. The apartment key that Miranda's mom keeps hidden for emergencies is stolen, and then a mysterious note arrives, scrawled on a tiny slip of paper. I am coming to save your friend's life and my own. I ask 2 favors. First, you must write me a letter. The notes keep coming, and Miranda slowly realizes that whoever is leaving them knows things no one should know. Each message brings her closer to believing that only she can prevent a tragic death until the final note makes her think she's too late. This remarkable novel takes place in the real world, but holds a fantastic puzzle at its heart. When You Reach Me is an original and a brilliant and profound delight. And it really is. It's such a good book. So I highly recommend, even if you're never going to homeschool, to read that book. So these next two books are from the earlier course, so younger children. And this book was a delight. It's called Detectives in Toga by Henry Winterfield. Let me see when it was published. Published in 1956 for the first time. And there's a little note that says, during the 1936 excavations in Pompeii, a temple wall came to light on which had been, let me start that over. During the 1936 excavations in Pompeii, a temple wall came to light on which had been scribbled in a childish hand the words, Caius Asinus or Est. You know, it's in Latin. I'm not really sure how to pronounce Latin. Caius Asinus Est. That scrawl from the days of ancient Rome was the inspiration for this book. So the back says, a hilarious whodunit in ancient Rome. Yes, Rufus wrote Caius is a dumbbell on his tablet at school, but no, he did not break into the schoolroom, did not tie up his teacher, and certainly did not paint his opinion of Caius on the Temple of Minerva, even if it is in Rufus's own handwriting. But now Rufus is doomed. Unless his 6 classmates can find out who is really responsible, Rufus will end up behind bars forever. Every hour seems to bring a new, confusing clue until the boys finally stumble upon the real culprit. Dun, 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 dun. You got to read the book to find out. And then this one, Understood Betsy. Oh, I love this book so much. By Dorothy Canfield Fisher. This was originally published, interestingly, Sonlight published it in 1996. I'm not sure if that was the original publishing date or not, or if they just republished it. I'd have to look into that. But it is set in 1916, and I'll read you the back. Sheltered 9-year-old Elizabeth Ann has always heard her Aunt Frances talk about those horrid Putney, Vermont cousins. Now she is terrified. Aunt Frances can no longer take care of her, and Elizabeth Ann has been sent to stay with her New England relatives. Rules at the comfortable New England farmhouse are relaxed. Aunt Abigail serves baked beans in the kitchen. Elizabeth Ann, now called Betsy, must wash her own bowl and spoon, and her relatives expect her to walk to her new school by herself. Worst of all, nobody seems to be the least bit worried about Betsy. Gradually, Betsy comes to enjoy the queer Putney ways of her country cousins, not realizing that Aunt Abigail, Cousin Anne, and Uncle Henry are quietly teaching her to think for herself. Then Betsy gets a letter from Aunt Frances. She wants Betsy to come home. It's Betsy's choice. Which life should she live? Understood Betsy has been published in many editions throughout the world. Generations of readers have delighted in its warm and charming portrayal of life in the early 1900s. Okay, so that answers the question about the Sonlight publishing thing. So it was published a couple of times prior to that. But this is a winner. Winner, winner, chicken dinner. Okay, this book I have been talking about nonstop for the last couple of months because I read this to my 5th child this past spring in school. And then my middle child, my oldest daughter, just turned 20 in June, and her birthday is in June. Last June, I had given her the idea of a trip to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. After this, I'll mention it as the Met, okay? And so we had never got around to going. So when I was reading this to my 5th child, of course, in the back of my head, I'm thinking, oh, I've got to get to the Met before June 30th. And we finally did it. We made it on June 29th. We met some friends after the museum closed, and we took a nice walk around Central Park. And as a thank you, I actually sent them a copy of this because they had never heard of it. And interestingly, in the last couple of months of talking about it to people, no one has heard of this book. So I'm doing you a favor by introducing you to this book. It is called From the Mixed Up Files of Mrs. Basil E. Frankweiler by E.L. Konigsberg, a 2-time Newbery Medal winner. Now, this was published, let's see, I think it was 1967. Let me see if I'm right. Yes, 1967. And E.L. Konigsberg is a woman. E stands for Elizabeth, I believe. She was a young mother with 3 small children when she wrote this book, and she actually did the illustrations. And so the illustrations for the kids are modeled after 2 of her children. And then the 3rd child, their face can be found in, I forget what she said, another I read this in an article. I just can't think of what it was. Her 3rd child is in the book somewhere in an illustration. Now, if we can, I will put on the screen right here a photograph of a bed at the Met, which looks remarkably like this bed. And so I said, I think that's the same bed from the book. Let me read you the back. Claudia knew that she could never pull off the old-fashioned kind of running away, so she decided to run not from somewhere, but to somewhere. Somewhere large, warm, comfortable, and beautiful. And that was how Claudia and her brother Jamie ended up living in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and right in the middle of a mystery that made headlines. 40 years, 2 motion pictures, and millions of devoted fans later, From the Mixed Up Files of Mrs. Basil E. Frankweiler remains a modern classic, a favorite of children and adults alike. Read this book if you haven't. I really recommend it. Now, some other books by E.L. Konigsberg. One that I have read, From The View from Saturday. That's another great one. 2 that I haven't. The Outcast of 19 Schuyler Place and Silent to the Bone. Maybe you've heard of those if you haven't heard of this one. Okay, I've saved this one for last because this is a book that I come back to time and time again. I've actually mailed this book to various people, who grew up on Long Island, relatives of mine, because this book is set in the late 1960s in a middle school on Long Island, and it talks about a number of places that I visited as a child, and so I just had to give them the book too. So this book is actually, I don't know if it still is, if it isn't, it should be, in one of the high school core levels. And my first son didn't ask me to read. My first child didn't ask me to keep reading out loud during high school, which was his loss, I think, but that's fine. I had lots of other children to read things to at the time. My second child, when he was reading this book, he just got to a point where he said, I can't really get into it. Would you mind reading it out loud to me? And I said, of course, sure. So we started, and I'm like barely into chapter 1, and I'm laughing, and then I think I'm crying, and I'm saying to him by the end of the chapter, I don't know how you can't get into it. It's so great. And he said something that will forever warm my heart. He said, well, it sounds better coming from you, Mom. So we continued on, we finished the book, and I got to the end of it, and I said, this book is fantastic. So when my kids there's 5 years between the second and the third, and then between the third and the fourth, there's 5 years also. So 5 years, went by. When my daughter was in high school, I said to her, let me know if you want me to read anything out loud. I get it if you don't, but please, I have to read the Wednesday Wars out loud to you. She let me do it. And then I had a good friend, a wonderful woman in my life, starting in 2000. She was the children's librarian in Lock Haven, Pennsylvania. And at that time, my oldest was 3 and my second was 6 months, I think, when we met her. So all of my kids grew up going to story time with her, and she just became very dear to us. Anyway, she was having some health issues a couple of years ago, and I said, I'll come and read to you if that's okay. And this was the book I read. And so I know that now it'll be even more special having read it to my children and to my dear friend. And now I have 2 more children who are going to go through high school, and hopefully when they get to this, they will let me read it out loud to them also. Let me read the back to you. Well, it's by Gary D. Schmidt, and he's become one of my all-time favorite authors. Gary D. Schmidt, if you're listening, you are very talented, and I admire your writing greatly. He is actually, I don't know if he still is, he might have retired by now, but he was an English professor at a college in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Why can I not find the publishing date? Oh, here it is. It was published in 2007. Howling Hoodhood is really in for it. He's just started 7th grade with Mrs. Baker, a teacher he knows is out to get him. Why else would she make him read Shakespeare outside of class? The year is 1967, and everyone has bigger things to worry about. There's Vietnam, for one thing, and then there's the family business. As far as Howling's father is concerned, nothing is more important than the family business. In fact, all the Hoodhoods must be on their best behavior at all times. The success of Hoodhood and Associates depends on it. But how can Howling stay out of trouble when he has Mrs. Baker to contend with? So the book list says, Schmidt makes the implausible believable and the everyday momentous, a gentle, hopeful, moving story. So if you haven't read it, I really recommend it. Now, I happen to have next to it, this isn't in the Sonlight curriculum, or at least it wasn't. Who knows, it might be now. I really should have looked at the catalog before saying that, but I don't think it is. Interestingly, when I have finished reading this to my son, I found this book at the bookstore, and I picked it up because I said, oh, that's the same author. And then I discovered it's not necessarily a sequel to this. It's more like a companion where characters from this book fall into this book, you know what I mean? But what was funny was I said, can we read that, on the side? And we start reading it, and I'm halfway through the first chapter, and he stops me and says, they're going to go get some ice cold bottles of Coke. And I look, I said, yes, how do you know that? He said, I already read that. So it turns out sometime out of high school, he had already read this book. So we ended up not reading it aloud, but I finished it on my own, and this book made me cry. Also made me laugh and cry. It's that, I think a book that makes you laugh and cry is like, you know, an especially good book. So here, 2 Gary D. Schmidt books that I absolutely adore. Anywho, if you have any questions about Sonlight, feel free to put them in the comment section. If you've read any of these books, if you're going to read any of them, please let me know that also. And I wanted to share something with you. I have never been an affiliate for anything, but as it turns out, Sonlight has an affiliate program, so I applied to it. And I'll put a link in the description now that says I'm a Sonlight affiliate. So if you know of anyone who is homeschooling or wants to homeschool and they would like to look into Sonlight, I would love it if you would share the affiliate link with them. I feel weird doing this kind of like little promo commercial thing because I've never done anything like that. Ever since I stopped selling Pampered Chef, I've never tried to sell anything to anybody, but I love Sonlight enough to tell you about that. When you get a Sonlight curriculum, you also get a gigantic notebook with all of the schedule pages. So here's an example of what my daughter, who is going into 8th grade this year, is currently using. She started this last school year, and she will continue on this school year. So this is Eastern Hemisphere, level F, 5-day program. They do have 4-day programs. That way, if you're involved in a homeschool co-op, you can count that as your 5th day. So there are 36 weeks, 5 days in each week. Here's an example. The Bible reading. There's the journey to the Eastern Hemisphere. Where the Mountain Meets the Moon was the first read aloud for this core. And the Lad of Courage was the first reader, which she really enjoyed. So all of my Sonlight books are kept with their core. So here would be, actually these are all extras from that same Eastern Hemisphere Explorer, because like I said, the schedule has changed over the years. These would be from what I would know as Core A. Again, it might be different. I do have a preschool curriculum. That Fun Tales was from preschool. And then here's more. Yep, there's even more. The purple right there, that's a preschool curriculum also. And of course, on my shelf, I have miscellaneous books. If you watched my video about the great library book rescue from Stevenson Library, here's an example. Anything with a black X would have been from Stevenson Library at Lock Haven University. Here are a few more Gary D. Schmidt books. Trouble and Just Like That. And then each child gets a shelf for the curriculum that they're working on that year. So this is my youngest child's shelf. And she keeps things in order. She uses these blue dividers. So each section has its own divider. This would be miscellaneous. That's her English book. Her history section. These would be her reader section. And then her read aloud section. And then this is my older daughter. A History of Us. She was studying the history of the United States. And she doesn't keep things in the same kind of categorical categorical? That's not a word. You know what I mean, in the same order. She finished To Kill a Mockingbird at the end of last school year. And here's some more. And then I actually have books and I actually had to put some in boxes. Oh, here's one. There's Pride and Prejudice, of course. 12th Night, a Roald Dahl book. Oh, here's a suggestion. I always have this whiteboard. So it says June because we ended school in June. And I make a schedule for the week so they know what day they have their lessons, if I have any appointments, if they have orthodontist appointments. And I always put a quote at the top. So this was our quote from last year. A person who never made a mistake never tried anything new. Albert Einstein. So if you have a suggestion for a quote, and of course I like quotes that are going to stir some sort of emotion or passion. What's the word I'm looking for? So a quote that is motivational. That's usually what the quotes are. One of my favorites was a quote by Winston Churchill, which said something like, "Success is not final, failure is not fatal. It's the courage to continue that matters." So I had that on the board a few years ago, and that one really stuck with me. And it's kind of pertains to my journey of discovery and even doing these YouTube videos. The courage to continue. So anyway, if you have a suggestion for a motivational quote for my board, please share that in the comments. When I ran out of some bookshelf space, I actually had to bring some books in here. And I have some, these would be high school books. Oh, that's a good one. If you have not read that, When Hitler Stole Pink Rabbit, that is an autobiographical book that is fantastic about that time in history. Oh, and then The Hiding Place, that book just ripped my heart out of its chest. Anyway, here's some examples. So I have books all over the place. Books, books, books. I love books. Well, thanks for watching. You take care.